Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to Shutter Magazine. I'm Dustin Lucas, and today I'm going to be talking to you about branching out with beauty retouching. As a photographer, I'm typically shooting in RAW. And as a RAW photographer, I love working in non-destructive environments. I'm a Lightroom guy. I love using Lightroom as well as other RAW processors because it's non-destructive, right? I can make all of my adjustments, export out that version or that particular edit, and I still have the ability to edit my RAW, reset my RAW, start from where I left off, do whatever I need to. Um, a lot of retouching programs require you to rasterize the RAW, right? So you're no longer working in a non-destructive, you're no longer working on the RAW file, you're working in a rasterized, say, PSD if you're taking it to Photoshop, a TIFF file, which is a little more universal, maybe even a JPEG. What I love about On1 RAW is I have the ability to work directly on my RAW file, do some retouching, skin smoothing, something that would usually require me to take that into like Portraiture or take it into another plugin or Photoshop to do some work. I can do it directly in RAW, On1 RAW, do it directly on my files, and it's non-destructive. Another great feature of the program is the ability to use layers. We'll get into all that next. Let's jump into some basic toning. Alright, so once I get On1 Photo RAW open, I have the ability to choose which image I want to start working on. We're in the Browse module right now, so what I can do is I can choose one of these portraits and open it directly into Develop mode. Now the first thing I like to do is just to do some basic toning. I'm a type of person that I want to get the exposure and some highlights, shadows, maybe even some contrast. I want to get that all dialed in before we get into color. So I have some options here under tone and color specifically to do that. A lot of people like to work with the histogram and really like to create sort of absolute density, if you will, using your black and white point slider. Let's start there and see what it does to our portrait. So in order to see what our histogram looks like, we can click on the Levels panel, and you'll notice on the left-hand side for a black point we have a gap, and on the right-hand side we have a gap for our whites. Well, what we can do is we can start to drag the whites into the positives until we can start to see our image get a little more of density back. Now, you'll notice that her face gets quite bright. What we can do is we can turn on our clipping to make sure we're not going too bright, right? So her teeth turning, this little red blotch right here is telling us that we're clipping. Not to worry, we can bring that down to where that goes away. Awesome, so now we have a somewhat absolute white point. We can do the same thing with the black point slider. See all those crushed blacks in the background? So we're not too far off from where we need to be, right about there. Now, if we want to toggle between the preview and our original edit, we can hit the backslash key to kind of go back and forth. Now, I do think our edit's a little flat, but I think this goes a little too heavy and starts to make the lighting look a little more uneven on her skin, starts to look a little too contrasty. I like the approach of a little more subtlety. I want to bring up some of the midtones, of this portrait because I'm happy with the exposure. I'm somewhat happy with the density, but let's start with midtone. So I can start to lift that. It actually allows us to go further towards those highlights. So by lifting this specific adjustment, as you can see, it does pull some of the contrast out of our image, but it brightens the skin up. It doesn't brighten the highlights a whole heck of a lot. It just brightens this image up on our skin tones, and I think looks a lot better if we toggle on and off. I just like the way that it just kind of evens out some of those shadows on her face and brightens her skin up. Now what I can do is I can drop my black point to bring back some of that contrast. So there we go. We can go from there to there and just subtle adjustments. It doesn't make the skin look uneven. That midtone tool really allows us to do that. Something you really want to watch out for is her eyes starting to get the raccoon sensation here. Not really. We don't have dark circles around them, but there's a lot of eyeliner. Just be careful when you're darkening these areas. We won't want to create dark circles around the eyes. But that's our first step, right? The basic toning. Now let's move on to color. Now what I like to do after I get the toning done, and I'm happy with the exposure, I work on color, right? Basic color correction. We have white balance with temperature and tint, saturation, and vibrance. I love that all of these tools are in one place. There's also a purity panel, which we'll get into just a minute on what that can allow us to do. So first of all, this image is pretty close to where I want the overall color. Pretty happy with it as shot. But just to make sure, looking for some neutrals in the background and some of the tools that are available to us, we can choose the white balance picker by clicking on this little eyedropper here, and we can click on an area. We'll put the crosshair maybe where a neutral is, right? So we'll choose one of these areas where we think, yeah, it's supposed to be black, and it's going to neutralize that area, but the entire image. And what you see is it really pulls a lot of magenta out of this image, throwing greens all over our subject. Now I know that the subject has a little redness in her skin, and we can fix that with a different panel. But by dropping the tint all the way down to the -21, she doesn't have a red cast. We're not next to a brick wall. We don't have a whole lot of red on here. We would never really drop this tint down. So I'm going to leave it back where it was as shot by clicking on the as shot feature. And I can also choose auto, right? And auto is going to kind of warm and add some redness in there. I'm going to go back a step. Overall, I mean, to really start to fix some of the redness in the skin and pull some of that orangeness out and maybe boost some of the blues here, we can do that in a different panel altogether. What I can do is I can scroll up and click on Show More. I could choose an option that says Color Adjustments. Now what this is going to open up is a very similar panel to what Lightroom offers called HSL. Right? So we have a whole bunch of options here: desert, fall, foliage, green grass, sky. Those don't really help us for skin. But what we can do is we can go down here to the picker or this eyedropper, and we can choose on this and click on the specific area that we want to boost. So if we want to adjust hue, saturation, or brightness, much like hue, saturation, and luminance, as Lightroom would call it, we can choose those different areas. So if I want to drop some of the saturation in our skin, I'll choose Adjust Saturation. I'll click the dropper and I'll just click on the skin and drag down. So it's going to open up the panel automatically picking for her skin, and it's going to drop those oranges. So I can drop the saturation down 4 clicks, and we can click on this little orange dot here, on, off, and on. So very subtle overall, just dropping down some of the saturation. Now if we want to take it down further, right, we can really see it killing that saturation. But just taking it down a little bit. Also, if we think she's got a little redness in her skin, we can throw the hue of the oranges towards the green side. As you can see, if you take it to the left, it goes to the reds. So if we want to add just a little bit of green to remove some of that redness, we can throw the hue to the right hand side, and then adds a little bit of green into the skin to get some of that redness out. Now, what we can also do is if we want to adjust, a different color or a different area of the skin, say we want to boost some of the hair, we can do that as well. So we can click the white balance eyedropper here, the little color adjustment, and we can lift it up. So it's going to take the hair and it's going to lift that saturation. Now you'll notice that nothing's moving here really too much, right? So what it's going to do is it's only going to adjust one color at a time. That's one interesting difference between On1 RAW and Lightroom, right? When you're clicking in Lightroom, it'll adjust multiple areas. So it's a little limiting if you really want to boost the reds and the saturation and things like that. Obviously, we're affecting her skin with the red saturation, but nothing was adjusted with the dropper. So just something to think about. I usually stick to target adjustment tools or the separate color editing tools to remove casts. I mean, she doesn't have a whole lot in her face. And again, I don't think we really need to push this too far. If I want to boost the blues, right? If I want to boost that saturation, I can click on that option and really lift this up. Again, if we go back to the dropper, right, left to right. And I think before I was saying up or down, that's why we weren't seeing any movement. I apologize for that confusion. You probably thought I was crazy. If we're moving to the right, it's going to take us saturation to the right. Same way with the left. So if I do that for her skin, same situation here. And I move to the left, I move to the right. It's gonna take those oranges down. But if we look in on the reds, it's not doing anything. Same situation here. If I choose the dropper, go right or left. A little limiting, but again, it'll get us kind of where we need to in saturation, trying to drop the saturation down a little bit. Pretty happy with that. Let's see here. So if we turn this on and off, get a little boost out of those blues. You know, I don't want to go too crazy with the blues, but just adding a little bit of that blue in, you know, kind of nice little color. I don't want to go too crazy. Maybe just 5 points. And then we can also do the same thing with brightness. Maybe we can take the brightness down a little bit. Well, once I click on the actual dropper. So again, subtle adjustments. And so what we can look at now is look at that purity option and sort of discuss what this offers. So what purity is going to do is it's going to desaturate the particular areas of the skin based on tonality. So we can do highlights and remove the desaturate the highlights altogether. Or what we can do is we can start to do the same thing with the shadows. It's a really interesting tool to just add a little bit if you have, you know, a color cast going on the highlights on the skin. Same way with the shadows, if you want to desaturate some of those shadows in the background to get rid of some of that redness. Again, it's going to desaturate it on her face as well. So be mindful of that. As you see, it starts to pull out of the hair. We don't want to go too heavy with that, but it is an interesting tool to just add a little subtlety. If the skin is, you know, a little too rich, or you have a cast going on, maybe with some bricks or something in a certain tonality that you want to desaturate. Just an interesting tool to use as well for color. Now we're ready to move on to skin retouching in that option that On1 gives us. Now we're ready to move on to the skin retouching tool. So what we'll do is we'll scroll up here to the top like we had done before for color adjustments, choose show more, and we'll choose skin retouching. Now this is going to open up a whole new panel and allow us to really start to dive into some skin retouching. Now as you can see, we'll zoom in and we can look at the difference between the before and after. This is after, this is the before. As you can see, it softens the skin. It actually adds some evenness, and we'll get into what that adjustment is. We're adding a little bit of redness and a little more saturation to the skin. It does flatten the contrast slightly to this to make this, you know, the skin a little less abrasive and blotchy is probably a better term. As you can see, turning this on and off, it's softening the teeth, the eyes, the hair. It's softening quite a bit. And something we want to make sure that we're doing is we're staying subtle with the retouching. That's the it's the biggest thing to remember with this, right? Be subtle. So we're going to go through the blemishes and the different options here. You'll notice you have subtle, moderate, and strong. You know, each of those adjustments kind of intensify. And there's a few different options as well. As you notice, I'm scrolling over each of the preset or predetermined driven options here. It kind of does all types of things. So if I choose auto skin smoother, it's an interesting one. You'll see that blemishes went to 50. And right, we have some blemishes, right? We have some pimples, some blemishes, some spots, some eye makeup. We want to see how well this blemish tool works. Well, if I turn it all the way off and I drag it all the way to the right, it's not really getting rid of the blemishes, right? It's just kind of softening the entire face. It's actually taking the features, some of the corners of the eye, and blurring them. So I'm not finding the blemishes tool, right? It's going to soften blemishes, but it's not going to remove them, right? You need to remove them with the healing brush or the retouching brush, which we'll get into in just a bit. So I'm going to leave that blemish. I'm going to leave the blemishes tool at kind of a medium. I mean, it's kind of set at 40, which I'm fine with for now. Now the smoothing we're going to go down to, that's going to allow us to you know, smooth the skin, right? I take it all the way to the right. Wow, it looks airbrushed. We have a early 90s photoshopped looked image, right? So adding smoothing gets kind of crazy after 50. Again, as you notice, it's applying it to the entire skin. It's doing an okay job. You see the eyes aren't getting too soft. It's not doing too bad of a job with that. But I'm going to keep the smoothing at about 30 just for now. We can increase this later. Just want to kind of show you the features here. So maybe leaving it at 35. Just kind of showing you before and after where we're getting. And again, it's softening the skin. Might be a little too heavy. Again, this is very subjective, all about taste. Some people don't do any softening. Some people do a lot. Again, it's about what your client wants. And remember, be subtle. You don't want to change the way they look. You don't want to offend anyone, but you want to clean up some of those distractions. And sometimes the blemishes are distracting. So you'll notice a shine is all the way at 0. If we take it all the way to the right, looking right here, we're looking for the shine spots. You know, usually on the forehead, it's pretty even lighting going on here, but we don't have a whole lot of shine, especially down the nose here, from left to right. If I turn this on and off, we're not seeing a whole lot of shine go away, but it's something that I like to apply because what it does is it will take some of those bright spots and it adds color toning in there rather than just recovering it like highlights would, just turning white to gray. This adds some color in there, some skin tone color. So it's kind of a nice tool to use as well. Be careful because it will change the color of the teeth if we let it. So using some of the shine, I'll leave that at like about a 30. You know, it's doing a very subtle amount in here and helping, but it is helping. Evenness is an interesting one as well. As you notice that it adds some red hue back to the skin. It just throws red all the way across the board. And so what evenness does is it tries to take out some of those hues and where there's some green hues in the shadows and tries to even out the color of the skin. So it does kind of a interesting split toning thing here. In some areas it's going to reduce the reds. In other areas it's going to reduce the greens. So in the shadows it's reducing a lot of those greens. There's some red hues that it's trying to even out on the skin as well. And so it kind of takes the coloration here and it kind of naturally tries to even out this side. So if you look at her face, the right hand side looks a little warmer, the left hand side is a little more desaturated, right? So what's the evenness going to do? Is it going to help with that? Well, it's definitely going to lift to the left up, you know, a little bit, but our right side goes up as well. So I don't know if it's really helping us out. Something we should really look at is, well, it's applying this to the entire image. So what do? Well, we have a color range option that we can actually click an eyedropper and choose that side of the face. So it'll actually choose that pigment of the skin for us, and we can adjust that for the range. So by clicking on the range, it's going to mask things out that it's not going to apply these, you know, this skin retouching to. Now, as you see how blotchy this gets, it's kind of crazy here. As we drag this to the right, more and more tones are going to come into the image. So I think leaving the range at 100 is going to be a good starting point, and leaving that alone. We don't want to isolate too much of this, but we can really take it down to allow less of the image to kind of have less of that toning. Now I'm still seeing this in the background as I drag this to the right. That changes color. So it's not really giving us that amount of range. I mean, because this tone is pretty close to her skin tone. So can't really fix that too much. Or can I, right? That's where masking is going to come in. Like the hair, the background are getting soft, also they're changing in color. We need to do some masking. So that's where we can jump into the effects panel to effectively start to soften just the skin and not the details we want to keep. Now we're ready to move into the effects panel to start masking where we want our skin retouching effects to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the skin retouching adjustment that we just made, and I'm going to go into the effects panel, and you'll notice we have an option to add filters. So when I click on add filter, I have the same option, skin retouching. So what's interesting about this tool is you see it's applied to the entire image like it did before. What's different here is I can click on the mask button and I can start to choose where I want this effect to go. So masking works twofold, right? I can brush in and choose where I want the mask to apply and where I want it to be masked out, where I don't want it to apply. But what I can also do is I can also choose how this mask or this effect blends with my image. It's very interesting, right? So let's start with the easier part, the masking, right? So I can choose to view my mask. Well, I know it's applied to the entire image because that's what white means. Same thing in Photoshop, right? White means it's applied. Black means masked out. So if I can click on invert, it means it applies my effect to 0 part of the image. Well, if I click on view again, we're not seeing anything applied to the image. So what I want to do is I want to choose lumen. Now what that's going to allow me to do is you see it did nothing here, right? Well, I want to view my mask, and you can see that it's showing the different parts of the image that it's going to mask in. It almost looks like it just turned it grayscale, right? Well, I can start to choose my different options down here below to choose how this mask is working with the subject. So I can drag my white slider to the left, and it's going to start to mask out all the brighter tones of the images. It's going to start with the whites to the highlights, to the midtones across the board, and you can see that it's only applying to the background. Well, vice versa. Since I want to keep this skin retouching adjustment to only the skin tones, I would naturally want to drag out all of the dark tones so we can make the background disappear quite quickly, as well as her eyes and parts of her hair, to where it starts to creep in on her shoulder. So I can go all the way down to where it creates a pretty decent mask. Now, what I can do is I can start to level out this image and really drag down some of those edges by dragging in the levels. I can drag the midpoint. Again, I think we're starting to get a little ahead of ourselves of what these sliders are going to do to make it easy for us, right? That's where we can go in and choose. Our brush is already chosen here to paint out, but if I wanted to paint in, I can hit the X key to paint in. As you can see, the cursor has a plus sign. It's going to add some areas that I want to paint in, right? Then if I hit the minus or the X key, I can start to paint out different areas. And I can use my brackets to make my brush larger, and I can really start to paint out all of these areas that I don't want the effect to go to. It's pretty simple, right? So what we can also do is I'm going to go back a couple steps. What we can also do is we can choose color range, right? So by clicking that, automatically adjusts my mask and makes it a little more fine-tuned. So if I want to choose a specific skin tone that I want this to sample from, I can then choose my range and limit what it's actually applying to, which is pretty cool. Gets us even closer. So you'll notice her hair has a lot of the same tones as her face, right? So we're only going to be able to get so close with that. I can now go into my different options here, and I can, right, painting in density. I can change the density of this this overall mask. I can choose to add plus. Excuse me, hitting the X key. As you'll notice, it's painting white, so it's going to put everything directly onto the skin. As you can see, it's not applying 100% of my mask to this image. So if we turn this off, view, on and off, it's a very subtle amount that it's applying to her skin. So you have to be careful with lumen because it's not gonna apply this effect to the entire part of the skin. So I can take the smoothing all the way up, and it's a very subtle amount. It's not applying to her entire face, but it is softening a pretty good amount. And that's pretty automatic. I haven't had to do a whole lot of custom masking. Now again, if we want to make sure that we're masking out the parts of the image that we don't want, hit our X key. We could start masking these areas out. So just painting this out really quick kind of allows me to do that. So I have kind of a bigger brush, kind of get rid of the hair altogether. Across there. Background, now I want to zoom in and make sure her eyes are completely masked out of this. That's very important. Her eyebrows kind of naturally went, as well as her lips and her teeth. We don't want to soften those things. Again, right, it's retouching. It requires brush work. It's not going to be perfect for us, but we're still working on the raw. Remember, that's non-destructive. So we can go in here and we can turn our mask to where we can actually view this image and see that it's just doing a subtle amount of softening on her skin. Maybe a little too much on the smoothing. We can bring the shine up where we had it before at 25. Evenness at 22. Blemishes are fine at 40. Smoothing we can go up a little bit higher. But as you can also see, we can turn the opacity down, which gives us even more flexibility on how we want to take this. So if we want to really push this strong amount of softening, we can take the opacity down to 50% and just see that subtlety of what we want to apply. Now what we can do is we can start to look at the blending options. And if we want to start to change the blending modes, we can scroll over the different options to see what it's going to do on our face. Something that we would use for like sharpening would be like overlay. We have some different options here, luminosity, to show some different subtle options of how it's going to be doing this softening. So again, if we go into the different blend modes, it's not really it's not really showing us too much on how it's going to affect the mask, as you can see here. But it's something that you're going to want to have your mask turned off on, obviously, to see what it's actually applying to the face. So a lot of these are kind of crazy. Put your different options between normal, luminosity. I think I'm going to keep it on normal for now. But I have some options on how it's affecting the highlights, right? How it's blending the shadows, more or less. If I don't want it to apply to the skin, well, if I turn that all the way up, it's actually removing all of our retouching to the skin. Well, it's not something I want to do. But maybe to the shadows, I can turn that up and make sure that it's applying to less of the shadows. We can also make sure it's applying to custom for the skin. Make sure that all these adjustments are only applying to the skin, and it helps out a little bit as well, right? So the blending options are a pretty interesting option as well. We can go back to our mask, and you can see that it's not applying to the outsides, but it's mostly just applying to the face. Again, it's a subtle amount. If we go back to the skin, shadows here, turn that on and off. So if I want to add another filter, right, I want to do sharpening. And maybe I want to sharpen everything but the skin. Well, I can actually copy, right click, copy the mask, and I can go up into my mask here and I can paste it. Really awesome feature, right? So instead of drag and dropping that, we can copy our mask. Now what do I want to do? Well, maybe I want to sharpen the skin. Maybe I want to sharpen everything but the skin. Okay, I'm going to do that. I'm just going to invert it, right? And it's still going to apply a subtle amount to the skin because we weren't, fully turned off on the face. But it's going to sharpen the entire image and not make it look fake either. So it's just an interesting effect. We can turn down the opacity and we can really add some sharpening here. So if I scroll down here, we have high pass. It's a little much. I like to do unsharp mask. It allows us to add a little bit of sharpening to the skin while also sharpening everything else. So of course we want to be zoomed in at 100%. We want to make sure, right, without sharpening, with sharpening, it's a very subtle amount. We can increase this to say like 300. Turn the threshold all the way off. Now we can see this, right? So it's sharpening the face, but our blemishes are coming back, right, pretty quickly. But overall, what we can do is we can turn this on and off, and it's really sharpening the hair, which I like. Again, if we want to, we can mask out the face if we need to. We can also choose a few options here if we want to bring down. Let's turn our mask on. If we want to mask out more of the face, we can drag that. It's kind of looking a little crazy. We can drag more of the, that levels down to get rid of the face. Again, be careful with these tools because they're going to be, it's going to make a lot of blotchy tones here. We can apply some feathering. The density's all the way up, which is going to make sense. If we want the window to kind of go down a little bit on the face, I'm going to turn view off. And now we can zoom in. Make sure we're kind of seeing the hair versus the skin here. So we want to make sure turning this on and off. It's definitely sharpening, and it's sharpening a lot of the flakes on the skin. So I mean, that's something I probably would mask out as well. Hitting my brush tool, and I could my opacity is at 80. So if I wanted to take my opacity down to like 38 and brush out some of those areas, just a subtle amount on the face, I can in some of those areas. Allows me to do that. Now you just want to be careful not blurring her eyebrow, and if I want to bring the eyebrow back, I can just hold up. I can hold Option and click and drag to bring some of that back. But we want to make sure we're sharpening the right areas and softening the others. So real quick, just kind of showing you, turning off sharpening and the skin retouching. Right, we're here. Here's our skin retouching, just a subtle amount, and then bring in some sharpening, just razor focused, right to the eyes. We have a little bit of work on the lips, but that gives us a pretty good amount of starting point to now move back into the develop panel and start to focus on the details of our image. Sharpening the different, the hair, eyes, and teeth that I want to focus on, as well as burning down the background. But our image is really starting to, get somewhere with these retouching tools, and we're ready to move on to the next step. Now, one thing you want to make sure you do is with the retouching, right? You want to stay subtle, but make sure our mask is solid, right? So just to go back to make sure that we've sort of chosen the right areas, right? We want to make sure we have full-on white, the white showing where it's masking into our image. Excuse me. It's applying the effect to the image. Where we're masking out any of those edges here. And so you just want to make sure, right, where the areas of that luminance mask was showing across our image. Just something we want to make sure that we have a good refined edge. We can add some feathering to sort of soften the edge as well. But overall, pretty happy with the way that this turned out. Something that I did want to mention too is when you have your range on here, specifically for how this is applying to your image. If you notice, if we click here, it's showing that the range is only going to parts of the face. There are areas that are being masked out. So if we click on the range tool and we drag it all the way to the right, it's going to apply this to the entire face. So just to show you a difference between where we're at here at 98 versus 400, it's a subtle difference, but I am seeing that it's softening some of these areas a little bit better. So we're here, a little less softening going on here on the edges, and throwing that there just to let you know it's going to mask out some of those areas of the face. So if we drag it to a certain point to the right, it's going to make sure that this skin smoothing is applying to the entire image, and it does a pretty good job to even that out. I'm pretty happy with it. I mean, we've got some retouch work to do, which we'll get into in just a bit, but now we want to fix the hair, eyes, and teeth, focus on a little more sharpening, and proceed from there. Now we can see here before and after, our image is looking pretty good. We're ready to move into the develop panel and start to apply some local adjustments. So if we click on our local adjustments tab, you'll see that we have an adjustment layer. So it's automatically turned off on our image, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to invert it so that way it applies everything to the image. You can see it's already making changes. So if I click back on my mask, we can go and see specifically what adjustments we want to apply across the board. It looks like it was automatically dropping the exposure down about a stop. Excuse me. So what we want to do is we can click on this more styles option, and there's going to be an option for us to choose for toothbrush. Now you'll notice that it's going to apply it to the entire image, and since we're doing small details, let's go ahead and invert our mask and go back and choose the toothbrush option. Now what we can do is we can zoom into our image here, shrink our brush down, and we can actually paint in the toothbrush feature here. As you see, it's taking the teeth, it's desaturating them, brightening them, Of course, we don't want to go too heavy with that, but just doing a quick adjustment here, we can kind of clean those teeth up. Now again, we have an opacity slider here, really quick for us to drop that all the way down if we want, maybe going down to 50%, it's a little heavy, but again, just doing a quick adjustment to the teeth. Now what we can do is we can double click on that and we can do teeth. And that'll be our teeth adjustment. Same thing goes for the next adjustment that we want to do. If we want to do some work with the lips, I like to do a saturation and brightness with the lips. Now, I don't really have a preset, but I can save a new style, excuse me, if I want to increase the vibrance or specific adjustments. So what I'm going to do is I am going to paint on the lips so we can see this adjustment in full. So if I just go ahead, quickly paint over top of the lips, and if I choose, right, I can choose to view my mask really quickly. Just kind of going over the top of her lips, making sure we're covering the entire part. Again, this is the kind of boring part about the retouching, right? You're going to have to do some masking. It's not a quick slider and you're done. Of course, we could choose specifically the pinks in her lips, but we can do a little more adjustment. So I'm going to go ahead and name this lips. And what we can do is we can increase the brightness a little bit, just so they're not as dark. Again, we can change the color of these lips altogether. Just a little bit of brightness. Add some saturation back into these lips. Just seeing the difference, turning that on and off, kind of changing the color a little bit as well. Maybe we want to bring back some of that. Ugh, that's looking a little crazy. As you can see, our mask isn't applying to the entire image, so we want to make sure that's not the case here. If you want to mess with the contrast on the lips, I'd be more worried about filling in some of these spots here. We can adjust that with the retouching brush in just a bit, but just adding some saturation. Overall, I think that that's going to. Don't want to do that. Yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with the way that looks. Just a slight lip adjustment, nothing too crazy. Next, we can move on to the hair. The hair is something that I definitely want to work on some. Maybe bring a little bit more warmth back to the hair, a little bit of sharpness. We can use the structure to do that. So this adjustment we'll call hair. And again, we would just we'd add a layer for each local adjustment that we'd want to do. So if we want to specifically paint the hair, let's do just that. So I'm just going to do a quick mask here, paint in exactly what we want to adjust. Again, if we're a little loose on this, we can mask out some of the face if we get some of that in, but just kind of showing you real quick. Make sure we're not getting any of the background or any of the face. We can quick to view our hair. Make sure we get everything. Not missing any big spots. Now we can go in and do some quick adjustments with the hair. We can bring the exposure up slightly. We can warm the hair, which I think looks nice. Add just a little bit of, maybe a little bit of vibrance. Bring that warmth down just a little bit. And now add a little bit of structure. You don't want to go too crazy with the hair, right? Now we're looking a little insane. But I think, zoom in here. just kind of taking the hair and adding a little more pop to it. Really looks nice. So it's those little details, spending some time with the hair, right? Maybe we're going a little too heavy on the warmth. I don't think we need to necessarily warm the hair up too much, but those bringing some of those details back into it definitely help. Kind of makes the hair look a little more highlighted. As well, we can bring the structure back down if it's a little heavy. All those things, and again, if we want to take this adjustment down to 50%, and kind of just look at it up close to see if the hair is looking just a little bit better. We have that final opacity that we can make an adjustment on. So moving on to dodging and burning. A little bit different tool is you don't really have the ability to dodge and burn in one layer. We'd have to do one for each. So if we would want to burn down the background, we could just create a burn layer. And that's literally going to be taking the, if we apply, I think in a case like this, whichever part of the subject, whichever part of the image there's less of going on, I tend to invert, and then you can actually paint out by hitting the X key, and we'll just choose her specifically. We can dodge her out. Now, you want to be really careful with this, right? Because if you're doing dodging and burning, you're definitely going to have some issues with haloing. You don't want this to look too fake. Again, we're doing a quick mask here just for the tutorial. This is, I spend a little more time on this, going through, but just kind of quickly just showing you burning down the background and then bringing her back up to where she should be. It's definitely the proper way. You want to leave the edges around her a little bit darker, but that's a little bit closer to where I would go, and just kind of turning this on and off, right? Just those subtle adjustments. Her hair's getting a little dark. That's okay though. I mean, it's gonna get a little darker around those edges. All normal. We can actually take the opacity down on this if we want, just so it blends a little bit better. But I think darkening down that background really helps, as well as making sure we're removing this off of her face as much as possible. Make sure we're getting that little spot. Just toggling it on and off really helps with the before and after, and it actually kind of burns down a lot of those flyaway hairs, which I like as well. So they're not as obvious and don't cause as much of a distraction. Of course, we still want to remove those. Just adding this burn layer kind of like, doesn't make them look as obvious, which is kind of nice. A little, less work, the better. But something we definitely still want to, fix. So those are the things with the effects panel. One last thing that I would do, going back to my overall settings, is I'd want to make sure my details amount, I can take this up to 100 if I really wanted to crank in some sharpening. I think that's a little heavy, but we can always add in more sharpening if needed if your image is a little soft. Just showing kind of this details panel, it just adds a little more crispness to our image. We can take that down to like 50, just to add a little more sharpening. I don't know about you, but the teeth seem like they're glowing a bit. That's something that I would probably go back and reduce the teeth down into there so they're not glowing white. But we have some, I don't think this image is really exhibiting too much noise, so it's looking pretty solid overall there. But that's about where I take this image here to this next step. So now we're ready to move on and talk about the retouching brush and starting to do some pixel manipulation. Now we're ready to talk about the retouch brush. So let's zoom into 100% and start to look at some of those blemishes the skin retouch tool didn't fix. As you can see here on her face, we have a little bit of work to do cleaning up some of the blemishes, the makeup lines, some of those areas we want to remove because they're distracting. So we're in a raw processing program. We have pixel manipulation. Nothing new, right? We have the clone wheel. What is the retouching brush all about? Let me show you. Strike the R key, and we immediately have our brush to start doing some work. You'll notice that our retouch brush is already applied, so it's going to show minus, painting in, right? There's no real, change in this tool, right? There's no adding and subtracting. It's just removing pixels. Now, mind you, we're working on a RAW file. It doesn't save history states in with the retouching brush, with the clone stamp. So what do we have to do? Well, we can create what is called a version in On1 RAW, so that way we can create a fully non-destructive edit in Browse, as well as we can have a fully edited pixel manipulated image. So that way we can still stay in somewhat of a non-destructive environment. However, if we want to go back, we lose all of those pixel manipulations. There's no history states in On1 RAW, different than Lightroom. That's okay. So I'm going to go ahead and hold Command and hit the apostrophe key, and that's immediately going to create a version of our image. So I can go to that version, go back into my develop module, zoom in at 100%, and I have everything from the last edit on this image. I just have what Lightroom would call a virtual copy, right? That's what we're used to. But in On1 RAW, it's called a version. So this is a digital copy of the image. It hasn't created two RAWs. Not to worry, it's not going to take away any space on your hard drive. But now I can click the Arc key, and I can use my brackets to shrink and expand my brush. Now, what I want to do is I want to click on something like this, or it's going to show red, kind of hover around, and just allow it to get rid of that spot. Now, as you can see, if I click the Command Z, put that spot back, I might need to make my brush a little bit bigger. You definitely want the brush to be, and I have my feather at 100% and the opacity at 100%. You want to make sure that your brush is a little bit larger than the size of the actual blemish. So, not to get stuck on that spot, right? That might be better utilized with the clone tool, right? So if I click the S key, that's going to give me the clone tool. Make sure, let's turn our feather all the way up. This is a perfect case where we can sample with our Option key, and we can clone that out. Where our retouch tool doesn't work, our clone stamp tool is going to have to come in. That's just all part of the game, right? So I want the retouch tool to work because it's more like a healing brush, right? It's a little more automated. It's going to do a little better job of creating a natural sample on the face. It's also going to allow us to kind of go in here. Maybe I want to remove these lines under the eyes, right? Well, let's see how well it's going to work with blending that. Not too bad of a job, actually. So if I go under here, I'm going to get rid of these, not so much crow's feet, but just these lines under the eyes. If I just want to get rid of those and smooth them out, it does a pretty decent job doing that. So again, I can resample over top of an area, try and clear some of that out, cleans up some of the eyes. Now, I have a hair on the face that's going across here. It's kind of annoying. I can shrink my brush down and see if I can just get rid of that with one fell swoop. Yeah, it didn't work. So, right, there's going to be pros and cons to this tool for sure. Just make sure you're being subtle about your adjustments. But with the retouch tool, there is no sampling, so we're just going and kind of clicking in areas and more or less hoping it's gonna clean up some of those problem areas. So I can grab onto a pimple like there, and voila, it's for the most part removed. It kind of smudged that area over. We can retouch back over top of that. Again, if we need to click the S key, bring in our clone stamp tool, shrink it down, resample an area. We can do just that. I think we went a little too far. And again, I'm working on a laptop. It is a MacBook Pro, but 16 gigs of RAM isn't the best way to do retouching. Just want to give you a heads up. You probably want to be working on a desktop station with at least 32 gigs of RAM. Give you a little more performance overall. But just some adjustments on the face here. I'm going to go back, hit the R key, go back to my retouching tool, and just see how much of this we can clean up. I'm going to go over the lips maybe and some of these kind of white speckled spots here and see if it'll just clean all of this up for me. I can do a massive area or a smaller area, however you feel comfortable. But I like to see real quick if this is something I can fix in On1 RAW, and it is definitely not. So I'm going to go back and just kind of cleaning up some of these areas overall. Now we have a crevice here. So again, you'll take some time with the retouching brush. It's going to be very similar to the healing brush, but it's going to be thinking skin tones, as well as some of these blemishes. So it's going to blend those areas a little bit better. But we can go in and just kind of remove some of those marks, and even go in and remove some of these crosshairs on the forehead. If we just want to go and kind of meticulously remove all of these hairs off the face. This is something where we can move around. Of course, we don't want to remove any natural beauty marks. You don't want to remove any moles and things like that. Here on the shoulder, I mean, I don't think that's it really makes sense to go into that depth. But if you want to remove some veins and things like that, if you want to get really critical in some of these areas, I mean, you have the ability to smooth out some of those veins as well. Does a pretty good job of that. So overall, just doing a little bit of work on the face goes a long way. Again, we want to be subtle. We don't need to, make her look unnatural or to where she doesn't recognize herself. But in spending a lot of time with the retouching brush, you remember you don't have the ability to save history, so you want to make a version. In some cases, you might need to zoom really far in and spend some time with the clone stamp tool. So if I wanted to get rid of this area here on her nose, and I wanted to sample just below, doesn't seem to be doing a very good job of trying to sample her face. This might be something I would take into Photoshop and spend a little more time on. Again, we weren't able to get rid of the line by just doing the retouching brush. Maybe that's a better start. Doesn't really do a terrible job on the nose. That might be something we want to blend in a little bit better. Can't really get much done with the clone stamp tool. So I'm going to leave the hair there. I think it's much less noticeable if I leave that slight hair on the face. Just that in Photoshop later. What we can do now is we can look at the distractions in the background, getting those flyaway hairs, and spend a little more time with the clone stamp tool. Let's move there. Now the most meticulous segment of this tutorial is going to be the cloning, right? Getting rid of the flyaway hairs, moving things in the background. I don't have a quick way to do this, right? I can do it on On1 Photo RAW, and the beauty of it is we're still working on a version, so I can choose to, now that we've done the beauty retouching, I can choose to create another version if I want to get extra non-destructive, to always be able to revert back. Let's start there. So if I go into my browse module and go into the grid mode, I can create another version, command apostrophe. Now I'm working on this image. So if I make a mistake or I need to go back, I have the ability to do so. So real quick, if I want to do this, um, and I will say, if you want to do some cloning and you'd rather do the flyaway hair removal in Photoshop, you're more than welcome to, right? This tutorial is talking about what On1 RAW can do for retouching if you want to keep almost everything there. There's a few things in Photoshop we'll go into in just a bit with like the liquefy and the transform tool for just a little bit of body manipulation. But just showing you real quick what we can do with the clone stamp, right? So I want to get rid of, real quick, this background orange distraction. I don't know what it is. I want it gone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click my S key. It's going to bring up my clone stamp. And I'm going to choose a point in the image that's pretty similar to a point that I'm going to remove. So I'm going to choose the middle of the X, pretty straightforward. And I'm going to line that up as best as I can. And I'm just simply going to paint over it. Now I want to make sure that I'm not resampling an area or dragging any hair from her head into this particular area. So you just want to be careful. You might need to resample a couple times, but again, just removing that to a repetitive background, really simple, right? It's kind of a kind of a toss-up to get that fixed. Kind of made it a little easier on myself. And it looks like I didn't have the opacity all the way up. So rookie mistake, right? Got to turn your opacity all the way up. So I'm going to go ahead and just paint over the exact same area one more time. So don't make a mistake like me and leave your opacity at 75, because then you're going to be doing this twice. So real quick, we'll just clean some of that area up. Now we have the same issue going on with the hair, right? So we want to make sure it's a pretty dark background. So I'm not too worried about choosing a pretty outer area going all the way out here, just because I want to get pretty close to her hair. So I want to make sure, I always kind of drag up to make sure we're not manipulating our background too much, but we're going in and we're just fixing all those flyaway hairs without making it look unrealistic, adding new hairs in as we just did right there. And so we can paint out a lot of these kind of nasty flyaway hairs that just kind of distract the viewer from our subject. So just make sure we're not distorting the fence behind her head too much. Again, I kind of have a little bit sort of easier background here because it's repetitive, but when it's off and looks pretty obvious. So we got to be really careful. Again, my computer wanting to keep up here. I'm going to end up cropping this image anyways at the top to straighten these out. I don't like that we're kind of at an off-kiltered angle. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now and just crop this image. So we don't have to worry about, right, some of the stuff at the top. If we're going to crop this image, we're going to crop it. I'm going to straighten it out. I think it needs to be leveled out for these specific bars. And so I'm just going to do that and see how much of her we're going to take away. Just real quick, right? All these are looking pretty continuous across the top, which is really important. So I want to make sure we're getting as much of this image as we can. And of course, we're going to be cropping a little bit at the top. That's okay. Not a big deal. We're not cropping her hair completely out, but it kind of just works to get rid of some of that annoying hair on top. So I'm going to go ahead and keep this crop like that. And it's a lot less work for me, right? I don't think it's a terribly crazy, be nice to have a little more space up here, but I think that's okay, just to have a little bit, have this coming in just a little bit. I like that the shirt's at an angle, gives us a little more, kind of a nice little line there, breaking out the symmetry and the straight fence behind her. So it's a straight on shot. It just looks cockeyed. It doesn't look thought out. So I want to make sure that that's kind of straight across. It's a continuous backdrop. So we're going to keep working with the clone stamp tool. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to choose this outer fence here. And I'm just going to make sure that we fix some of these hairs here. Again, subtlety. I think leaving some of the strands is okay. We don't want this to look unnatural. Of course, she doesn't want to have we don't want to give her a helmet head, which happens quite easily with making any over-the-top adjustments with the hair, but just kind of going in, cleaning some of that up, and just kind of getting rid of that gives us a real nice change. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the browse module, and I just want to compare these two images. I'm going to just kind of see where we're at before our as you can see here, the difference between our flyaway hairs with and without. Wait for our, there we go. Wait for our adjustment to show. So just removing the flyaway hairs. Let's see here. Zooming in on both. As you can see, just cleaning it up, just those little adjustments make all the difference. So what we can do now is we can send this image directly into Photoshop, and we can make any final liquify adjustments and keep everything saved and organized in On1 RAW. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our second version that we created, and you can choose to right click and say send to Photoshop CC 2018. So we can do that. We could choose some options here, right? We're going to edit a copy because it's going to rasterize this image. It's going to make it a Photoshop image. It's going to change the bit depth, so it's going to rasterize at this point. We're going into Photoshop. We no longer have our RAW. But what we've done is we've created a few versions, right? So we have our fully edited, retouched image here. Then we have our first level of pixel manipulation with the retouching brush and doing some more blemish removal. And now then we have all of our flyaway hair and all of our distractions in the background. So keeping multiple versions, yeah, that might be a little over the top, but just to show you the flexibility and having a fully non-destructive workflow is very helpful. So we're going to go ahead and edit this in Photoshop and continue on to our last and final touches. Now that our image is opened up into Photoshop, we're ready to do some of our final touches. So something I like to do to just do a quick sort of liquefy or thinning to the entire body proportionally is what I like to do is create a new layer altogether. So I'm going to do Command J. It's going to do that for me quite quickly. I can choose transform, choose to name this layer transform. So that way I can always keep my base layer separate. So I can do Command T to open up the transform module. Now you can hold Option to squeeze both ends in. I think that's a little extreme for what we want to do here. What I'm going to do is I want to extend the right hand side of this image. So in order to do that, I mean, I'm okay with a little gap here. What we can actually do, excuse me, I'm going to extend the left hand side to give a little more room over there. I can bring this in. As you'll notice, I'm just going to line it up with the fencing. Now, I kind of have the ability to do that quite quickly. If I click enter, yeah, it looks like it's off just a bit. Make the same adjustment. A little bit closer there. Right? Not too terribly off, right? I have a pretty quick and easy way to adjust that altogether. So you'll notice just before and after, we kind of just brought her over to the side, and it did it quite well. Now I have another option that I can do, which works occasionally and sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. What you can do is you can, if we're transforming in both ends of our subject here, I can choose to do a content aware, making sure I have her, right? If I want to extend, but you'll notice how kind of nasty this edge gets, right? So with content aware, you have to be really careful of how it's going to, and it just starts to look terrible. So with an image like this, I definitely wouldn't want to use the content aware tool as much. I think of just doing a simple transform kind of gets us where we want to go without distorting our fence too much. So just that subtle thing, right? We can't really take the opacity down on this image. So if we wanted to take that back a notch and go a little more subtle, so if we wanted to just bring, right, her in just a bit, this is something. Just a subtle move, right? Well, now our fence looks terrible. What are we supposed to do? Well, can we paint in a mask? Sure, let's try. So if I actually paint in the mask here, make sure I have all my right, it's going to paint the mask and now it becomes a problem. A different option, get rid of our layer mask we don't need. Now we can go in and choose the content aware, make sure the human is selected. Now I'm dragging that back to here. Now we actually have the ability, takes our fence, doesn't warp it too much, but now I just have sort of a subtle adjustment, and I like that. So what I can do now is go into filter, choose liquify, and just do some subtle adjustments, right? So if I want to go in and make the eye a little bit bigger, tiny bit, right? So it was a little bit, squished, but I don't want to make her iris or eye too large. But what we can do is just open it up just a bit. That little adjustment makes all the difference. I think her lips are really full. I don't think we need to do a whole lot. We don't want to like increase her smile. That starts to get super cheesy. I don't want to mess with really too much in this image. Something I tend to do sometimes, just because of the camera distortion, just bringing up some of that jawline a tiny bit. There's something along the lines of when you're working with a lens, if you're working with a longer focal length, it's going to have less sort of unflattering expressions on the face. But just to, and we're not changing her appearance too much. That's something I want to stress with this, right? We're just fixing some of these things, that someone might find unflattering that, happen with the camera, making sure we're kind of fixing some of those things altogether. We don't want to alter her appearance too much, but it's just that subtle adjustment that we're making here, and we can very subtle. So I'm going to go ahead and just choose OK, and we can see real quick just the change from there to there. I think it's subtle enough. It's not, we're not going too crazy. But again, we want to make sure that we're not making the client uncomfortable. We're being subtle. They're not coming in and going, that doesn't even look like me. That looks like I lost 40 pounds. That's not the goal here, right? It's just to clean up some of those things on camera, um, some of those distractions. Overall, maybe a little too heavy on the transform and liquify. That's all to your taste, right? This is retouching. It's between you and your client, what you think is right. The more natural is better. I 100% agree. Just showing you what you can do. Now, once we save this image, this is the part I like about On1 RAW, right? Much like in Lightroom, once you send an image to Photoshop, it automatically saves the copy in the same spot, so it shows up in your browse module. Once this completely saves, it It's taking its sweet time. I'm going to go ahead and quit out of Photoshop. And we could take this directly back into On1 RAW, and there's our PSD. Alright, so now I have my final images back into On1 RAW, and we can see the kind of progression that we've gotten here. From the left, it's our as shot image. The far right image is the one that we just finished up in Photoshop. This one in the middle I wanted to show you are just some little adjustments that I made to really finalize this image. Doing a little bit of eye work in terms of brightening it up. We fixed a little bit of a little more skin work. And doing a little more, warmth in the skin, and a little heavier on the retouching. But you can kind of see those differences, just those takes between the two of these, right? Just a little more work with some dodging in the eyes and a little saturation, boosting the iris. Those things go a long way with this, right? So we have a few things in here. I'm okay with like some of these swirls in the hair. I mean, that's natural. Those kind of things happen. I mean, she doesn't have perfect hair. She's not supposed to be a Barbie. That's the goal with retouching. We want to be subtle. We want our clients to still recognize themselves. So just kind of showing you the power of On1 Photo RAW. We have a lot of retouching capabilities, a lot of non-destructive. That's the importance for a RAW workflow. We can create the versions for when we're doing the pixel manipulations. Hopefully, Photo RAW will put together a history states in the future, so we can have access to that, so I don't have to create 3 versions of an image as I'm removing flyaway hairs, pimples, blemishes, things like that. But I'm really happy overall with where this image is going. And again, I mean, if you have any questions or anything like that, you can definitely send them my way. On1 RAW has really given me the ability to work outside of Lightroom and work on some of my more key images directly in Photo RAW and cycle between that and Photoshop to really get the results I'm looking for. Thanks for tuning in.